Well, hopefully we got this correct. Oh, there we go. All right, guys. So, so those of you that follow us on our about that today, there are places that you can put comments. So if you have any questions as we go along, please go ahead and write your comments and see what we can do. So I'm still trying to figure this.
A person who is dying. So it's you work between the medical professionals, so hospice, palliative care, a regular doctor, and also the funeral industry. So if you choose to do your end of life through a funeral home or perhaps a home funeral, the death midwife comes in and helps to just like manage those things in between. If you're doing a home funeral, it would be working with the family members to participate in that process, the washing of the body, doing final rites. If you're working with a funeral home, it might be just making sure that the wishes are coordinated well with them. It kind of allows the remaining grieving members, actually very similar to a birth doula or midwife in the sense that instead of coming into the world, you're going out.
Okay, and that's what I was going to ask. Where does that transition go from? It's kind of interesting, birth to death, right?
Yeah,
So,
very much.
Yeah. So why?
Hid the death from me. I was always at the funerals, traditional. I remember sitting, having the luncheons and like the Italian side, always getting the spumoni dessert. That was a big thing. So I was always kind of present and part of that process. I think then as I became an adult, this is going to sound kind of quirky, but I used to play a role-playing game called Vampire the Masquerade, and there's a clan of vampires called the Giovanni, and they're necromancers. So there's a certain amount of creativity and maybe even echoing real life in that, and being just kind of fascinated by death and spirits and what we would now call the paranormal, of course.
Of course, yeah.
And then also just coming into now where I've become more involved from a metaphysical standpoint, having an even larger understanding or reverence for spirit. And so when this opportunity came up, a friend of mine had done a death midwife training about a year ago, and I thought, God, that's really cool. And that was really the first time that I became aware that this practice even existed. And then I just felt like I wanted to be of service somehow and to find something where I could practice my spirituality, and it felt like a really natural fit. And so I did the training about less than a month ago, a few weeks ago, actually. And it just sort of, everything has fallen into place. And I feel like it's something that even from just basic death planning and recognizing that there is a void in our culture around death and dying and a taboo. People are afraid of it. And it's something that I think it would be great to help people reclaim and embrace. And there's a certain, I think it makes your process of grief softer when you have the ability as a family member or a friend to participate in the process. It makes it a little bit easier to navigate.
Well, and do you think it like takes the pressure off when they have someone making sure that all the things are done?
I think so. And and there's such, when you start digging into like the traditional practices of funeral homes, and I'm trying not to knock on them and not to generalize, but it is a money-making profit industry. And I think you don't know what you don't know. And so, when you're going through this process of someone dying, and then you're in charge of not only having this loss, but you're in charge of trying to coordinate all these things for that person that you loved who died, it's just, it can be a really harrowing experience.
It can be, yeah. And been through a few myself.
Right?
So,
all of us have done it. But we don't, and it's not like a frequent thing either where you're like, oh yes. And it's not the same thing every time.
No, yeah.
So just, I think it helps all around. And it also helps if the person is actually going through a natural dying process, I think it helps them.
I think it does. We talk about, Reiki and end of life with Reiki and helping the transitions and stuff. And, you do Reiki and you're level 2 now.
Yes.
And so I just think it helps. It helps the body to relax. It helps the people to relax. But then bringing this aspect in and helping with the end of life stuff or the final stuff, whatever you want to call it, really makes a difference to add everything together. So, yeah. So choices. Choices are interesting. We've had this conversation, and I was so amazed at how many choices there are for end of life. Now, not everything we can do in Wisconsin, but
right, or the U.S. Right.
Yeah.
So, the contemporary funeral process is, you go talk to a funeral director. The body gets embalmed. The body is, visitation. You might have a memorial service and then burial, with a traditional coffin. I think there are other. It's not. I will refrain from going into the details on the actual embalming process, but what it does to your body is not, in my opinion, pleasant. Mm-hmm. And the fact that when you are buried, I mean, environmentally, it puts so much hazard into the soil, into, even if you're cremated, into the air. So
you're talking the embalming.
Yeah,
fluid itself.
The embalming fluid actually, literally, I mean, you do decompose, you do go into the soil. It's not just this pristine thing that lasts forever. Embalming was really started after the Civil War as a way to preserve bodies in transport to get home to their families. And then the funeral industry kind of picked up on this, like, hey, here's another thing we can do to make a little bit more money. And a lot of times too, modern funeral homes won't put you on display or have a proper visitation if you're going to have a viewing without being embalmed, just because they don't want things to happen. Mm-hmm. So outside of that traditional kind of like what I think most of us probably know is a contemporary funeral home experience, there are green burials, so you don't have to be embalmed. There's no state in the United States that forces you to be embalmed at all. And your body can be, washed, and you can be buried in a wicker type of casket and buried in a green cemetery to just naturally decompose. There's also, cremation, which I think is becoming more and more popular. But there is a certain amount of carbon emission that goes with that. It's not quite as hazardous if you don't get embalmed, because when you are embalmed, if you have my aunt was embalmed, had a viewing, and then was cremated, all that embalming fluid and everything burnt, and it sits in the atmosphere. Plus,
so then it falls back and we breathe it.
Yeah, exactly. And your fillings, if you have mercury fillings, that sits in the atmosphere for almost a year. But cremation is obviously another alternative. There is a thing called promession, which is not, I don't believe no one's really doing it here in the U.S. There are maybe a few facilities that are starting to pop up, but it's freeze drying.
Okay.
There's also resomation, which is a sort of cremation by water. So I did learn that there is a facility in Stillwater, which is pretty exciting that it's close by, that will do that. And, similar to like ashen cremains that you get from a regular cremation, you do have some remains that are left. They're much finer, but it uses like 1/8 of the damage to the atmosphere as cremation.
Okay.
So it's better. In Colorado, there are some communities that are actually doing funeral pyres. So very Viking.
Very and native.
And native, yes,
Yeah,
right?
back in the day, yeah.
I know.
So tell people what that is.
So where it is traditionally like a big wood pile and you are laid out and fire is set and off you go. I mean, I did jokingly ask if we could get the flaming arrow shot into the fire, right?
That would be interesting.
That would be cool. But there too, like it's in, I know there's a couple of communities in Colorado and there were some caveats around like, usually it's allowed there, these communities are approved, but there are ways to like buy a spot or something for your own funeral pyre. If you knew a sea captain, you could technically do a burial at sea.
Okay.
There are, I think it's called terramation, and this is pretty popular. There are a few facilities in California that are doing it where you are literally like human composted. So they put you in I don't want to say a container of some sorts with soil and other things, and they turn you every so often and you are basically turned into compost, and they will return that soil to you and you can keep it. You can use it to plant a garden. You can do whatever you want with it. Yeah.
What about the tree pod?
The tree pod is specifically in Italy right now because we have a freeze line here.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
So, but they do the tree pods in Italy. You get put into a pod and you are planted and you are decomposed. It's probably very similar to a green burial. You're decomposed naturally and then a tree grows from you. And there are legacy forests too, like out on the East Coast. There are some legacy forests where you can be, I think it's your cremains and stuff are buried, and then you have a tree that grows and people can go and visit your tree.
So it's a kind of another version of the Italian way?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, there are lots of options. And I think probably in the next month or two, I was going to try to feature some of that information on my Facebook page just because there is so much to it. But I think it's nice to know that you could go outside of the traditional contemporary funeral.
I agree. Since we've been talking about this, I've been doing, how do I want to go? I know my soul's gone, but how do I want my physical body to be treated after we're gone? So,
right.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I like the composting part.
I do too, and ideally, like I would hope that perhaps, and maybe this is a future, or maybe this is my future, I don't know, but it would be great if we could get some green cemeteries, here in Wisconsin, and even a composting, facility set up in Wisconsin. I'm sure there's possibly state caveats to all that, but yeah, it would be cool to have better options and things here, I love the fact that I always thought cremation for myself. Like, I definitely feel like I don't want people to like stare at my body after I'm gone. Right. I want them to remember me alive and pull up this Facebook Live and whatever, Right. But then when I heard about potentially like the environmental impact of that, I thought, well, and then the resomation facility that's in Stillwater, I was like,
That works.
You know, so I do plan at some point on reaching out to them and seeing if I can get a tour and get some more information around it. But, you know, it's not that much of a haul to get my body over there and
Hour.
make that happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's better than one step better.
Yeah, exactly.
and
It's the next
cremation.
step. You know, and I like the idea too that there's something still like left behind. Like some I'm not just totally vaporized and gone, you know?
Yeah, so then that comes the next question. Where do the ashes go?
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I don't have any children.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a variety of things you can do with the ashes. You know, I could sit in someone's cupboard forever and a day, and
Yep.
that's fine too.
I have relatives in my cupboard. Yep.
Right? Exactly. Ancestor altars, what have you. I have a girlfriend of mine down in Florida who actually makes resin memorial jewelry. So she can take some of your cremains and places them in a piece of jewelry that loved ones could wear or keep. And
So
or
many
you
options.
could, I mean, I've seen them like there's glass like paperweights or pieces of art that are made with cremains placed in them for people.
So is there something set up yet for people that have no family left?
Not that I know of.
So you need to find a good friend to carry out your wishes.
Right. Or maybe it's just a matter of, you know, they get scattered,
Right.
you know?
Oh yeah. So could that be part of the midwifery?
That could. Absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. I will go and spread your ashes or your cremains for you. Absolutely.
How interesting.
Yeah, and even I think past that, like, I was talking with Shell, who visits here quite
Yep.
frequently.
Yep.
You know, her husband recently passed away, and she was just telling me about how stressful it was for her, while she's still very much in the grieving process, to go through the paperwork.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a process that goes on for months, if not years, hopefully not more than a year, but
Right.
it's a process, right? And so, you know, that's something where I would be happy to sit and help
Okay.
with something like that, because that's, again, stressful, you know, and just, it's a lot. And she said to me, I just wish somebody could just sit in the room with me.
I remember we talked a few times after her husband passed, and she would actually go and sit at her son's house,
Yes.
not have conversation. Don't
Just
need anybody
wanted someone there.
in the house with her so she could sit and do this.
Yep.
So I get that. I mean, yeah, I've had to be the in charge person of a couple, and yeah, they're not the easiest. So yeah, interesting. So when do you remember the June date?
Oh, June 15th,
So next week. No, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So June 15th.
No pressure.
Here at Soul and Synergy in the classroom, we're going to be doing Death Cafe per se.
Yes.
So Melanie will be sharing all this here, and you know, I think maybe we'll do a Zoom option.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
That way, if people want to join on Zoom as well, we can set that all up. So, and we'll run that. I think we said 6:30, right?
6:30 to 8ish. I'm sure it'll possibly go later than that. Basically, just I have this idea that I know there have been a couple of death cafes in the area before. People have mentioned that, but like, it's just a common place for us to get together and just talk about stuff. It's not necessarily a grief session, but you know, what are your ideas about death? What do you want to do? What don't you want to do? What are your feelings about it? Just to let the community have a space
Right.
to talk about it.
So instead of, you know, we go back to this because I do not like the terminology funeral. I don't want nobody mourning me
Right.
at all.
To celebrate.
So we call it a life celebration.
Absolutely.
And so you can actually help with that,
Yep.
setting all the stuff, and you know, so because it happens. Family members get involved and try to take over.
It's kind of like a wedding, right? Like
Yeah.
there's always a drama going on.
Right. And this takes that drama out.
Hopefully, yes. I will do my best.
Yeah. Well,
I know, and I'm going to be going through it with my own. In fact, some of this like got kickstarted because of my mom. She's 83, and a friend of mine's mom recently passed away, and she found out she had no plans. And so I was like, and her mom said she had plans, and she had no plans. And so then I remember my mom saying the same thing to me when my dad had passed away. She was like, "Oh, I've got all my stuff together, blah, blah, blah. It's all." And then I said to her, I said, "Hey, Mom, where are your plans?" You know, I mean, she has a will. She has a power of attorney set up and like the legal paperwork. And I said, what do you want us to do for you? And she was like, "Oh, I haven't done that yet." And I just was like, we're going to do that. Because I don't want any guilt around, like, did I do the right thing for her? I mean, I have a pretty good idea of what she wants to do and what she would find acceptable. But, yeah, I want her to actively, like, tell me.
so when your parents say they got it all set up,
Don't believe them. Ask for proof.
but do we think about it all being set up as the food's ordered?
No.
That's being all set up in your eyes, or
Right.
yeah. So where are we having the celebration of life and
Right.
all those kind of things as well?
Right. And she did say to me, we were talking about it this week because she knows I'm coming for her. But we were talking this week, and she said that, she wants to go and talk to, there's a funeral home where she actually organized my aunt and uncle's burials and services through. She's like, "I want to go and talk to him." And she's like, it was interesting because she said, I don't want to be in the room when you and Greg choose my casket. And Greg is my brother. And I said, "Well, why not?" I said, "It's your casket." And she's like, "Well," and so it was interesting kind of having that conversation with her. And I said, "Listen," she's a huge Coke fan. And I said, "If you want to pick out a red casket, I can vinyl print some Coca-Cola logos for you. We can make this thing happen." And then she kind of laughed and she said, "Well, maybe," or Packers,
Right.
So it's interesting. So she actually, wants to go and talk to a funeral director, and that's great, because she's going to very much do the contemporary, modern funeral. So it was good to start to have some of those conversations with her. And, I think just to write that down, there are a couple of websites. There's 5wishes.org, I believe it is, that I think it's $15. You can download a PDF and fill it out. And it asks all those questions like, what kind of music do you want played?
Oh.
What, is there anything? It even asks some of the paperwork. There's another site called Before I Go that has the same type of paperwork. And it's like, what do you want to say about yourself? What are the details of your life? And that could be used to help form an obituary, right?
Right.
If you don't know all of the exact details. It also asks, like, who do you want present, like, when you are dying? When you're in that process of dying, who do you want in the room with you? Do you want any music played there, or anything read to you? What do you want that to look like? So I think it helps get them comfortable with this idea.
I like that.
Right?
I like anytime we can take out the mystery part of it.
Yes.
In this instance, I love mystery, but in this kind of situation, the better things are.
Yes.
And then we know we're not going to be haunted from the other side.
Correct. I mean, and the mystery comes when we can, like, talk to your spirit afterwards.
Right.
But
right. Did we do the right
right
color
thing.
green?
Are you gonna haunt me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I mean, some of these documents get really detailed, and it's beyond just like, what do you want us to do with your body? It's literally like, what are the things that you enjoy, the comforts that you want during this particular time.
Right. Yeah, and wow. there's so many little logistics that can go into this.
Right, that you don't think about. And you could
Yeah.
be as detailed or not detailed as you want. I mean, it isn't always comfortable, I think, for
Right.
people. And these are like legally binding documents. The Before I Die site is pretty specific to the state that you're in, but then I know 5 Wishes is like accepted in 44 of the US states as like a legally
Nice.
binding document. And you can change it. You know, I think someone brought up the idea of like once a year, be it on your birthday or whenever, you can come back around and revisit that documentation. What if your preferences change? You know, what if you're
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
right? Because we are dynamically changing individuals, so nothing is written in stone.
Well, and as we progress in life and we become drawn to different things or different ideas, and
Right.
you know, life, everything changes.
Maybe you've reconciled with your relative and it's okay that they're there.
Right.
You know, and then I think too, the part of a death midwife is to use that documentation to really help kind of facilitate and guide a lot of that
Right.
part. You know, like, and plus too, just having the comfort and confidence of knowing that someone has your back.
That's cool. Yeah.
Because so many people, like, I know that some people have done like pre-arrangements with funeral homes, right? Well,
Yeah.
they maybe never told anyone, and so then they die, and none of your remaining living relatives or friends know about this, and then they go and do your arrangements, and you lose that money.
Mm-hmm. Plus what you want.
Right.
Yeah. Plus
Yeah.
all the stuff you had set up.
Exactly. So I think it totally makes sense, and especially too, I feel like we have less and less of traditional families these days.
Yeah.
So like for me, it's a comfort to know that, oh, I can have a point of contact that might have my wishes.
Yeah. Is there I mean, there's a government database. When you die, you get clicked, you know, or
Right.
whatever. So is there a thing that goes, oh, he's passed, and we need to strip him here?
Right. There is not a thing.
And yeah, so
But I mean, each state does have, like, I know the state of Wisconsin has a form you fill out for like your disposition of body, and so that tells them like what you want to have done.
okay, but where does that?
That gets filed with the state.
It does.
But
Okay.
I don't know, well, actually, I don't even know if it gets filed with the state. I believe you just hold on to it until it happens,
It's like everything else,
right?
and nobody knows where it is.
Exactly. Put it in a Ziploc bag in your freezer because it is a fireproof place to store things. Just saying.
Huh? Never thought. Well, I guess I have thought about that. Yeah, I have.
We
heard
talked about
before.
that the other day.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting.
I know. Who would have thought? We all have fire safes.
Huh. That's crazy. Okay, could go somewhere else with that. But anyways, so, what's the first step?
So you might want to come to the Death Cafe. That would be the first step. I am working on, right now my website is basically just a landing page. But I am working on putting up a website, and I want to provide links to the 6 essential documents that everybody needs or should have.
Okay.
So one of those things is a living will, which, you know, you can go to a lawyer, an elder care attorney, or that 5 Wishes documentation, or Before I Go documentation. That's kind of your living will. So that pretty much covers the, like, who gets my things, what to do with my stuff, etc. There's healthcare power of attorney. There's a financial power, durable healthcare power of attorney. So those 2 documents are basically what happens if I become, if I am deemed incapacitated and cannot speak for myself, right? So those 2,
Out your wishes.
right? So the healthcare one defines 1 or more people who can speak for your healthcare when you cannot. Same for financial, except that's more around like this person has access to your bank accounts,
Okay.
or potentially has access to your bank accounts to deal with your financial matters. There is also HIPAA, so that is, we all sign HIPAA, but that basically allows somebody to release your medical or to have access to your medical records. That was 4. Now I'm going to start going dead. So another one is disposition of body. So that's the paperwork that says I would like to be buried, in a casket, embalmed, yes, no. Do I want to be cremated? If so, where, things like that. So that is actually a document with the state of Wisconsin. What is the other thing that I'm totally forgetting? Healthcare power of attorney.
Your life insurance.
Oh, the DNRs.
Okay, yep.
Yep. So that is usually a document that says, how do you want, what kind of medical care do you want if you're in end of life? Like, do you want to be resuscitated? Right? Do you want CPR measures? Things like that. And if you're younger, yes, maybe so. But, if you're older, maybe not so much. It can be a pretty rough physical process to go through CPR.
Broken bones.
Yes, right? And you might not, what is your quality of life going to be if that measure is taken?
Right. So in the DNR, or the power of
durable power of healthcare.
Yeah. So I know when we did that for my mom, we had to, it's filed with Sacred Heart.
Yes.
It's in Epic. It's in the national database, and we had to do all that because that's a form that you can carry, of course, but if you put it in there, every hospital on that system, every doctor has that access to see, oh, wait a minute, yep,
Right.
he's got it.
It's tricky though, because I know with my mom, some of the systems don't, hers is filed through Sacred Heart, but Marshfield Clinic doesn't
Let's
have
not
access
do
to it.
Anything with Epic.
Right. And in her case, so she actually had it activated last summer. She wasn't feeling good, and she was kind of just in this temporary, I'm sure there's a medical term for it, sort of haze. And so they activated it on her, which was really fun. And my brother and I are her POAs for that. So he was good cop, I was bad cop. And he loved every minute of it. And so, then suddenly the doctors were talking to me, and it was pretty stressful. But it was even more stressful for her, and she actually had to go through the process of getting reevaluated by them once she started feeling better, and they rescinded it. Mm-hmm. So I'm still her power of attorney on that level, but she is now deemed competent to make her own choices again. And that was even a process. No one really knew what exactly needed to happen for that, and
it's a rarity, I suppose.
It was a lot of hoop jumping.
So here's something we wouldn't have probably thought about without Lee. Thank you, Lee, for posting that. An authorization to speak to your disability company benefits.
Yes.
So there we are, more things for the list of things that needs to get done.
Right, exactly. So I think with that authorization for disability company benefits probably come from the durable power of healthcare. I think once you have that documentation, and more so too, know where it is. Yeah. Right? I signed,
in the freezer.
Right, I signed those documents with my mom, and I knew the hospital had a copy, but I knew where my copy was, but I didn't know where her financial one was and stuff, and luckily I found it. Sorry, Mom, I rooted through your apartment. But and furthermore, it really helped that I knew who her attorney was, so I was able to call him, and while he could not necessarily go into any details, he did at least confirm that yes, it is me, and
okay.
And that my mom had documentation. But and here's the other thing too, with a will, or when you get that documentation filled out, okay, it is a different form. Interesting. Authorization to speak with your disability company. All right, Lee, I will reach out to you to get some more information on that. But you could have that paperwork filled out. It's only good if the person has the paperwork, right? So even though like her will essentially is activated and stuff and is valid, it's useless unless I had a copy of it,
Right.
you know? So,
Yeah, and that's the thing. Okay, and then the other part is, once you get the death certificate,
yes.
then where do you send it everywhere? I mean, you got all these.
And do they want a certified copy of the death certificate, or is just a copy of it okay?
Okay, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like the recommendation that I heard was it's good to get at least 10 copies of a certified death certificate.
When my sister passed, we did that, and we have I only have like 1 or 2 left over because I had to send it to so many places.
Right, that's just it. And that work goes on forever, it feels like.
Yeah, that's your year-long thing. Or something will pop up. Like, so we had her mail forwarded to our house.
Yeah.
So when things did, like, oh, she had a credit card that has to be taken care of.
Yeah, who knew?
That was never there. Or, shutting her cell phone off. Well, we had to send the certificate to do that. And all these things,
And a lot of that is covered, I know, in the Before I Go documentation. They have a lot of really detailed questions like, where are your bank accounts? What's that information? Where are your internet passwords?
Yeah, shut my Facebook off. Yeah.
That's another
Yeah.
thing. Like with my mom, I mean, I jokingly gave her a book for Christmas a couple of years ago that was this little black book, and it says internet passwords on it, which anybody who's in IT will tell you, no. Like,
Right.
never write it down. Don't put it on that Post-it.
Yeah.
But for her, it works, and that's fine. Like I have a password app that I use, and it has a master password. Well, that'll be with my paperwork, right?
Okay.
So that,
Yeah, because there's things
we
you
have
gotta
electronic digital lives. So, or maybe it's, delete all my stuff. I mean, it's interesting because when I was doing the training, Angie, the person that was doing the training, she was told us a story of an individual that she was working with who was in the process of dying, and he was really, really, really super restless. And so she talked to him, and she said, "What's really bothering you? What's going on?" And here he had a stack of letters for like a woman that he was a pen pal with, and his wife didn't know.
Oh.
And he didn't want her to find these letters, and so he asked her to destroy them for him.
Wow.
And she did, so because it served no purpose.
Right.
So like there are things, we're all very private people, and who can you trust to
carry out your stuff.
Right, and not judge.
And not
right?
hold it against you.
Exactly.
In the afterlife.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that is interesting. Huh. So, how can they find you?
Right, so I have a Facebook page. So Soul Dance Rights and Death Midwifery is my Facebook page.
I'll put it here.
And then, if you can, without the pressure. It's one word.
C
N
E-A-N
S-S-E. Sorry, it's an S-E, get rid of the C. It's a Soul Dance with an S instead of a C in dance. And I'm also at
Soul Dance Midwifery.
Death or Rights space. RITES.
RITES.
Yes. And Death Midwifery. So Soul Dance is actually a domain name that I started for myself back in like 1997. I used to blog before people blogged.
Right.
And so it's kind of resurrected itself. And so yes, I'm at Soul Dance Rights and Death Midwifery. And then the website is at rights.souldance.com.
Yeah, why don't you do that one?
Yeah.
There. Now you can find her.
There.
On the
So
website.
that's how you can find me. I've got business cards here at Soul and Synergy. I'm going to be doing the Death Cafes here. Yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere. You can just look up Melanie Ceraso, Ceraso. You can find me there. So,
Cool. Or you can call the store or find, email or whatever else
Yeah.
here, contact us here and at the store and stuff, and we can connect you guys up. So,
exactly.
well, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been a beautiful day. 45 minutes we did.
We
Woohoo!
did. Like nothing.
So, like nothing. And I'm sure we could take it another hour.
We could.
But, so thanks everyone for joining us this morning, and hopefully next Friday, everything will be back to normal, and we will be live on WLTK DB Radio. Have a great day.
Bye.